recording. All right, friends, welcome. It is week 3, lecture 1. That means we have already passed the midway hump, and now we are entering into week 3, which is also our belt week, which is fun and stressful all at the same time. So it'll be really, really good, really, really fun. A couple things before we get started. As I said, that this is the belt exam week. That means that on Friday, you will be receiving a code, given that you qualify. You'll be receiving a code, and that'll be for the first wave of our belt exam. In order for you to, right there, I just said, if you qualify or be eligible, in order for that to happen, here's the things that you need. You need to have done 90% of week 1 and week 2 assignments, meaning that's actually supposed to be 100%. I'm sorry. So it's 100%. There we go. Thank you. Okay, 100% of week 1 and week 2 assignments. Looks like I got a little bit of feedback. Can somebody go off mute for me? Okay. 100% of week 1 and week 2 assignments. And including resubmits from week 1. So as long as you have given an effort for week 1 and week 2 for those assignments, and as long as you, if you did have any pending resubmits from week 1, if you did those, and as long as you see a passed, then you are good to go. Now, that being said, all of these are due by 9 a.m. PST on Friday. So as long as you've done them by 9 a.m., if you do have a pending resubmit, as long as it's turned in, it was supposed to be turned in last Friday, but if, whatever happened, or if you didn't turn in a couple of the week 2 assignments, then all of those are due by 9 a.m. I'm going to go through, I'm going to do one last check to make sure that you do qualify and you are eligible, and then you will get the first wave of the belt exam. Well, what happens if I don't qualify? Well, if you have not turned in 100% of week 1 and week 2 assignments and 100% of the week 1 resubmits that were due, right? If you don't have 100% passing on week 1, then you are opting out basically, or you are losing out on the opportunity for the first wave of the belt exam. Now, if you are eligible, that means you get 2 possible chances to pass the belt exam. If you don't pass it the first time, that's okay. You would get a retake, basically. That being said, if you are not eligible, because there's 2 waves, it's for the weekend and then the following week. If you are not eligible, that means you must wait till Monday, because you won't be giving out any sort of codes over the weekend. So you must wait till Monday for the second wave to hit, but that means that you are opting out of the first wave. So you will get 1 try. And if you do not pass the belt exam in that try or in your 2 tries, obviously the course will require a retake, which can incur $500 and will incur a $500 fee. So please make sure, do it as much as you can. Like, make sure you get both chances, at least get your feet wet with the first one. Even if you feel like you don't know what's happening, do the first exam, just see what it's like. And then we can meet and then walk through sort of the things that are confusing, and then, do the second one there. These unlock codes, it says Friday after 3 p.m. I will typically give them earlier, just because I also understand you guys might have Friday off or schedules are different. So I will try as soon as to get it as close to 9 a.m. PST, like 10 a.m. typically is when I do it, because I go through every student, make sure everything's okay, and then I send it all out. So I do try to get it to you as early as I can. We're going to talk on Wednesday, really what to expect on the belt exam. But just know from little blurbs is you have 24 hours to complete the exam from when you open it. What that means is you will get a code, right? It'll be, can't remember, think like a 5-digit code or something like that with like letters and numbers. It's randomized. You will have from Friday to Sunday night to submit that code on the platform and then get your belt exam. Once you submit that code, you will have 24 hours. The timer starts. You'll have 24 hours to take the exam. There is one caveat though. The belt exam is due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. PST. I'll put that in here on this as well. So the belt exam is due. So if you don't start the belt exam until 9 p.m. on Sunday, well, then you only have 2 hours and 59 minutes to do it. So that you have 24 hours, as long as that 24-hour period is within Sunday at 11:59. So really the last chance for you to start an exam and still get the 24-hour full thing is 11:59 p.m. on Saturday. You can start it on Sunday. It won't take you 24 hours. You can start it on Sunday, but you just know you will have less time because regardless of when you started it, it is due at 11:59 p.m. You will get it on Friday. It will be due at 11:59 p.m. PDT on Sunday. Are there any questions about that?
Yes, question. So I think based on information about the belt exam, they told us it's supposed to be end of the day, 11:59 local time. So depending upon what part of the country you live in, I think it's basically just end of the day. Well, at least that's based on my understanding.
It's PDT. Yeah, I see what you're saying. No, it's PDT.
Okay, so basically, let's say I were on the East Coast, so I'm
a little bit more time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure that's clarified because I was under the impression it's local time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody asked, when will the retake be due? So let's say you take this first exam. I will have them all graded by Tuesday. Just because there's a lot of you guys, so I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to get them graded by Monday, but I don't know how feasible that'll be. I'll do my very, very, very best for you guys. What will happen is you will get a grade on Monday or Tuesday morning. Like if it is Tuesday, it'll just be very little on Tuesday because I've blocked off Monday to where I can't have any meetings. That being said, you will have from Tuesday all the way until 9 a.m. on Friday to do your retake. Also, if you do not qualify, if you're not eligible for this first wave, right, where the belt exam is due, if you're not eligible and you do it over the weekend and you become eligible, then you can get your code on Monday. But again, you only will have one more try because it's one more wave. And it is still due by 9 a.m. If I get your assignment, let's say I happen to grade your exam super early and I give you back that, what I'll do is I'll send you an email. Hey, here's what you got. Here's everything. Here's with the criteria. And then if you do need a retake, I'll give you a new code. That way you can start it whenever you want. So, you could potentially get a new code on Monday, or by the latest would be like, I'd probably say 12 o'clock on Tuesday would be the latest that you would get a retake code if you needed one, if you took the first one, if you took it during this first wave. If you didn't do it, if you didn't take it, regardless, if you qualified, but you still don't take it, which I vehemently do not suggest that. Like, I would be sad if you did that.
Miriam.
Oh, Miriam, you're off. You're off.
So I didn't get a chance to.
Okay, thank you. You could get it on Monday as well, but don't do that. Please, 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 please don't do that. You only get 2 tries. Because if you don't pass it, if you only take it one time and you don't pass it, it's going to cost $500 to retake this entire course. So we don't want that. Any other questions?
Yeah, so for the exam, will the questions be different? Let's say you do a retake. Would it be different questions? I'm assuming.
Yep, it's an entirely new data set, an entirely new exam, entirely new questions.
Okay, but the concept for the most part is just going to be the same. It's just even with
yeah. If you guys actually go to your, I don't want to pull up anybody's because I don't want to show any grades. But if you go to your actual sheet, your assignment feedback document, on the bottom, you're going to see a tab that says Belt Exam 1. That is the exact criteria that I am going to grade you on. So I will fill in that sheet for you and say, hey, your exam has been graded. Congratulations, you passed. Here's what you got. Check that sheet for more information. So that sheet will have all of your graded information on there. And just also so you know, you're going to have to deal with duplicates. You're going to have to deal with either missing data, or you're going to have to deal with missing data. You're going to have to deal with data that's not correct. Whether that's, if you guys did the
type issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you remember in the project where you had low fat, LF, reg, you're going to have to deal with that stuff, deal with columns. You're going to have to deal with that. And then you're going to have 2 univariate, which we're going to talk about today, visualizations. You're going to have 2 multivariate visualizations. So that being said, although all that's due is weeks 1 and weeks 2 assignment, there is week 3 material on the exam. So please make sure that you do that as well. So don't think that it's just on week 1 or week 2. There is week 3 material. Obviously, you're going to have turn that in by Friday anyway, but please make sure that you have to know univariate and multivariate in order for you to even pass the exam.
Okay, and that's what you're pretty much going over this week, correct?
Univariate, multivariate, yeah. I'm going over univariate today and multivariate tomorrow. Or
Awesome.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will have given you everything you need for the exam.
All right. Gotcha.
Yeah. Any other questions, friends? Cool. Okay. Just as a reminder, I know that as if this couldn't be stressful enough, you still have 3 core assignments due this week. They are due Friday at 9 a.m. same time. That is your average height, your histograms and box plots, and then project 1 part 3. So just make sure those are still due 9 a.m. by Friday. Okay, so today, by the end of this lesson, we are going to be able to deal and understand what a univariate data visualization is. We're going to talk about what exploratory data analysis looks like. We're going to understand and sort of talk about matplotlib.pyplot, which is what we're going to use. It's really sort of the framework for all the visualizations we're going to use. And we're going to deal with our 3 univariates that we're going to talk about. These are all that you're expected to do on the exam. You only have to do 2 of them as long as you do them correctly. So I'm going to give you 3. You only have to do 2. Super, super easy. Today we're going to create a bar chart. We're going to create a histogram, and we're going to create a box plot. One thing I want to talk about for the exam before we jump into it is the point of the exam is not just to show I can create a box plot, I can create a histogram, I can create a whatever. The point is to actually explore the data. So what I am asking that you don't do, and I'm going to be pretty rigid on this, is if you just throw in a random visualization that doesn't tell you anything, that's going to be an issue. We're going to talk about visualizations today and what they're used for. So there will be a question. It's a real life, we try to emulate it to like a company has hired you to figure out X about what's going on with the employees. So we want to take the data and try to figure out what's going on. That's the question, not let's just clean the data. Let me throw in a visualization and then just hope for the best. Cool. Just wanted to really hit that home. Okay. So when we're dealing with univariate, I've said 2 words, univariate and multivariate. Univariate is when we are exploring 1 column at a time. One, kind of like unicycle, right? Where if I'm saying this is a univariate visualization, I am simply dealing with 1 column. I'm not doing multiple. I'm not doing something over time. I am just dealing with 1 specific column at a time. We do this and we use these visualizations, yes, to show audiences, but also for us as data scientists to understand our data. Sometimes looking at numbers doesn't really tell you much, but seeing it and visually seeing it will tell you, oh, okay, I'm understanding the trends that are happening in my data, in my financial, institution. If I look at the stock market, right, and I have, if it was just a bunch of numbers, I wouldn't really see like, oh, this is going up or going down. But you see a line graph, right? And it sort of tells you, oh, the market's really, really down. It's a real quick way that we can visually look and say, oh, I see now what is going on. Now, sometimes we will have this for a technical audience, and we're going to talk about one plot today that is really designed more for technical audiences. Your normal sort of person isn't really going to understand it. When we're dealing with exploratory data analysis, sometimes, and this is the data analyst role. So if you are really looking, like if you really enjoy making these visualizations, then maybe a data analyst role is something that you would enjoy, something you do. It's taking in data and modeling it to, sort of tell the picture of what's happening. You can sort of think about a real life case study of, if you are working at Nordstrom, right, which is a department store, if you're not familiar with it. And Nordstrom has the sale every year. I think it's in like July or something. A friend of mine, this is a real world thing from a friend of mine. Well, they have this big sale, and immediately after they take the data from the sale, how much they actually sold, and then they plot it to see compared to over the couple of years, how has it done? And then they also use that data to do some machine learning and predictive modeling for, what do they anticipate next year's sale to be. But by plotting and visually showing that, it can really make somebody who doesn't necessarily understand the numbers quickly understand what is going on with the sale, right? Maybe you're going to have somebody in the business side who, yes, they understand numbers, but they're more like marketing and like maybe your marketing team is like, okay, well, how did this do? We can see the impact visually and show that versus just being like, here's the data. And then be like, I literally don't know what a data frame is. Why are you telling me this? So we can use that. And sometimes there are technical audiences that we will want to do a little bit more technical things to show them. Just totally depends on your audience. When we're dealing with this exploratory data analysis, when we're exploring what is going on, what does our data look like? There's two that are really great, right? Understanding your shape and dot describe. Dot describe is going to be awesome. I'm sure I've seen in your homework, a couple of you guys have already started to do it. It'll tell you some really quick hitting points. When we get to box plots, we're going to see that specifically. Using dot describe, it'll give you your Q1, your Q3, standard deviation. So a ton of different tools, but it's just a great way. Again, what is going on with my data, specifically this column, right? If I want to look at this dot column, what is happening if I do dot describe? What's the mean? What's the Q1? What's the Q3? Now, when we are dealing with a univariate visualization, there's two categories we have. And I want to be very, very clear with this. Don't get these mixed up. One is categorical. So how many of each category? When we are dealing with a categorical value, I want to do something. It would make sense for me to do something like a bar plot, right? Where here I've got these different categories. This is cereals. We're actually going to work with this today, this data set, where I've got American Home Foods, Nabisco, Purina, Quaker Oats, blah, blah, blah. And all I'm wanting to see is each of these are a category. What is the value count here? When I'm dealing with categorical box or bar plots makes sense. If I'm dealing with the numeric value and looking at some of your homeworks, I would see that you guys would do a dot value count on a numeric value, and that doesn't make sense, right? Dot value counts is really reserved for a categorical value. So if I'm doing this same sort of thing, this would give me dot value counts. If I had this manufacturer, that would give me a good number that helps me understand my data. If I do a bar plot, same sort of thing on a numerical value, I'm going to get a ton of different bars and it's not going to tell me anything. Just reminding that the goal of these visualizations is to help me understand, not just to do a visualization. So on your exam, if you are dealing, be aware, am I dealing with a category or am I dealing with a numerical value? Which is my second one. Now I've got here this histogram. So this answers what values are most of the data near. So it sort of gives me my distribution of my data. So from point, from my lowest point to my maximum point, where's my data distributed? What point really occurs the most? Where's the majority of my data? And the second one is a box plot. Now this is the more complicated version, and usually you're not going to do a ton with a box plot unless it's a technical audience, because they're a little bit harder to understand. But what they are really great for is visually seeing where the outliers in my data. Again, when I'm dealing with a numerical value, if I'm Zillow and I'm wanting to see a distribution of houses and house sales in Albuquerque, New Mexico, this histogram might be good, but I might notice it very, very small down on the bottom right. Maybe it goes from 200,000 all the way now to 6 million. And you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. That's what we call an outlier, right? One that's sort of outside the bounds. We're going to talk about that in box plots. Box plots are great for that, right? I can plot that information and say, there is an outlier. Most of my houses sold for 300,000, 400,000. This one was 6 million. Okay. So that understanding that there's an outlier, knowing that if I take the mean of the house sale, if I just take the mean, right? That 6 million is going to drastically raise my mean of the house sale versus if I took the median. And so by using these visualizations, it allows us to understand which mathematical sort of equation or things that I can do, like which one I would want to use. Any questions so far? I know that this is a little bit more slide heavy than usual, but sometimes visually you need to see it before we jump in the code. Any questions? Cool. If you guys put a 1 in the chat, if this is making sense, put a 0 if it does not. Cool, lots of ones. Good. Today's pretty simple. Next week or Thursday's a little bit harder, but we're gonna have fun with it. Okay. So when we're dealing with these visualizations, everything we're going to be using is going to be built on Matplotlib. Matplotlib is an incredible library that allows us to plot and do a ton of different things. On top of that, Seaborn is another one that's out of the box, just really, really awesome. Allows us to do a ton of things. Seaborn is built on top of Matplotlib. Matplotlib is that framework, right? It's that foundation. And same things, Pandas. Through Pandas, we can do some plotting. The way Pandas does that is it uses Matplotlib to plot it. So there's 3 different ways that we can do this, whether we're dealing with PLT, whether we deal with Seaborn, which out of the box is really, really awesome, especially when you get to multivariate. I think you're going to really see the power of Seaborn. And then Pandas plotting, which again, all of these are built on the foundation of Matplotlib. Cool. So with that being said, let's go ahead and explore some data. Let's create some visualizations. As always, in our class sheet, there is our Google Colab. This is the guest lecture stuff today. So if you did want to watch that, it was on for loops and how to iterate through different for loops, that video and the collabs here. But our collab for today is going to be this guy right here, which is going to pull up this univariate plotting serial Python notebook. Here, I'm going to import pandas as PD, NumPy as NP, and then Matplotlib PyPlot. Now, this is a new one, Matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. Now, one thing I want to talk about is Matplotlib. I could say I want to bring in Matplotlib as mat, but if I wanted to specifically deal with PyPlot, I would have to, which is sort of our sub library. We talked about that last week. If I wanted to do that, I would have to say mat.pyplot every single time. So this is a way that I could separate out and say, I want you to automatically go into this sub library called PyPlot and just call that as PLT. Now this is pretty standard, not pretty standard, this is standard. So Matplotlib.pyplot is always going to be known as PLT. So if you are, on Stack Overflow or something and you see this, you're always going to typically see PyPlot. Cool. Also, I've got this guy right here. I just pulled this up. You should have access to this to where you can just pull this serial and actually have to download the data. It is available for you if you wanted to, but right now here's just a link that'll do it for you. And let's just look at our data right at the beginning. Looks like we've got some different names. I've just got my head here, different manufacturers. There's different types, so cold, or I'm assuming hot. We got calories per serving, grams of protein, blah, blah. If I'm wanting just to explore before we start doing this, because somebody asked this in Discord, I think it's a great sort of call out. What are some things I should always do to my data just to check? No matter what I'm doing, what are some things I should always do?
If you have null values,
Yeah. So how would I do that? I called this serial. So what would I type here?
.info.
Dot what?
Info.
.info.
Dot info. Okay.
No, that
I think
is,
Shanika said if there's null values.
well, you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
With
here
that
you
as
can
well.
see 77 non-null. But if I did want to see that, I could also just say serial dot is in
Is
a
null. Mhm.
dot sum, right? It gives me none. Cool. So I
Right.
see that I have 0 null values. What's another thing I should check?
duplicates.
Yeah. How would I do that?
Serial dot duplicates. Dot sum.
So serial. Duplicates. Is it duplicates or duplicated?
Duplicated.
Got some. Oh, so I got 0 duplicates. Way to go, guys. Now I knew that this data was clean because all we're trying to do is do this, but that's a really good thing. And on your exam, you're gonna have to do this. So just get used, do this. Do this info piece. You're gonna have to check if there's null values, and you're gonna have to check if there's duplicated. So make sure you start getting into that. Now we could obviously do different things. What is another thing? I'm not going to do it, but what's another thing I would want to check for?
Inconsistencies within the columns. So like last week, as you were saying, like low fat is LF or stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where I showed you if we want to go through all of our strings or all of our objects, which there's only a couple of these. We could do that for loop to show that. So yeah, always make sure you sort of do these for just to make sure that, you know, and especially on the exam, cough, 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 make sure you're doing this stuff and make sure. Last thing we'd want to do is whenever we get the exam, we're actually going to get something like, let me pull it up. We're going to get something like this. Ooh, that's tough. Okay. You're going to get something like this guy, our data dictionary. We're going to want to make sure that these data types match the data types we're getting from .info, right? And if not, we need to go in and handle that. Cough, cough, cough. Cool. So I'll put that on here too. Okay. Just trying to help you guys out as much as I can. Okay. Cool. So I've explored my data. I know that these are both good, so we're fine, but these are things that you want to do, right? These are steps that we want to go ahead and make sure that we do. So, okay. So if I wanted to, basically, I want to start looking at bar charts, right? Or bar graphs. And I know that that is a category, right? If I'm dealing with, or more importantly, manufacturer, if I look at this, I can sort of look at my data. My manufacturer's got General Mills. If I said something like sample, let's pass in 7. Cool. So I see that there's different brands, which tells me, okay, that this is categorical, right? I'm not dealing with a number, right? Especially also because manufacturer is an object. So I know I'm not dealing with a number. And so here I'm saying, okay, this is a category. This would be great for a bar graph, right? And so what I would want to do if I want to see, let's say how, like I want to plot how many times or how many cereals belong to each manufacturer. What I'm first going to do is if I want to get how many times each cereal, you know, or how many times each manufacturer occurs, what is something I could do for that?
Value count.
Count.
Yeah, exactly. So if I manufacturer counts equals, so I'm going to create this variable and you're going to see, we'll see why in just a bit. So I'm going to say cereal. I'm going to go to my manufacturer. Sometimes, especially when it's long, I don't know if you guys saw this, but if you guys are trying to remember what the column is called, if you just do this, sometimes, oh, no, it's not going to work. But if you were starting here, it automatically has all of the columns right here, so you can not have typo errors. So I know I want manufacturer, I want dot value counts. Cool. I don't see anything. So let's go ahead and show it.
Is that little trick only available for Colab, or could we use that on Python on our regular terminals?
It would depend not on your terminal. No. Yeah, it's just that's a Colab thing. Now, sometimes your IDE, whether you use like like Visual Studio or Jupyter Notebook. Sometimes I'll automatically do that for you, but not in like a terminal or anything. Yeah, sort of a built-in thing. But okay, I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, I see that 23 of my cereals are Kellogg's, General Mills. Cool. I'm getting good understanding of what's going on. Now, if I'm looking at this, because there was some confusion, because, you know, right here it says int 64, but if I see my manufacturer, it is of type object, so that can get a little bit confusing. If I say something like this, if I say type manufacturer counts, we can see that this is a series. So if you get confused by this guy right here, what it's saying is I created a Panda series, which has my index and my values, right? The 20, all the numbers. The values of this series is of type int64, which is these guys, right? 23, 22, 9, 8, 8, 6, 1. But the object, or the column in itself is of type object. Just specifically for the series, these values, because I'm running .value counts, it spits back a numerical value of type int64. That's why you might see that. So just wanted to point that out. This is a series and does that. Okay, so I've got my manufacturer counts. Now let's go ahead and plot it. And the reason I created a variable is because I'm going to now use that. I'm going to say manufacturer counts dot plot. And when I'm dealing with dot plot, if I look here, you can see that it automatically comes with a whole bunch of stuff. I can see the different, the kind of plot to produce. So if I wanted a line plot, I could say line. If I wanted to say bar, that's a vertical bar. Bar H is horizontal, a histogram, a box plot. These out of the box with my dot plot are what I can use and what I can create. Here, I'm going to say, I want it to be a bar H, which tells me that I want it sideways, vertical instead of vertical. So I'm gonna say kind equals bar H. Cool. Now, dot plot. So if I'm looking up this documentation, let's see. If I'm dealing with this, I just want to point out. If I'm dealing with this dot plot, and did you see how there was so many arguments I could pass in? Well, with that, there's other arguments, and we're going to see that you can continue to pass in different things to change the colors, to change the font size, to do a bunch of things. Now, reading documentation is going to be very, very important for this. It's a way that you can sort of discover what are the things I can change. For right now, we're going to keep it very simple. But on Thursday, we're going to look at sort of diving into the documentation. What does that look like? Seaborn has great documentation. Pandas, as always, has good documentation. Matplotlib is great. And so there's different things that we can tune. And in week 4, we look at tuning certain things. Tune if we wanted color, if we wanted there to be what we call a hue that sort of separates it, makes it like a trivariate thing. So, or trivariate visualization. So there's different things that we can do, but this is basically saying when I run this, here's an argument I'm passing in. In this case, I wanted it to be kind bar. Now with that, I can say something like plt.title. Now this is another method of my matplotlib, and this allows me to give a title to my plot. I'm just going to assign it to this plot. So I'm going to say number of cereals by manufacturer. And we're going to keep it like that. And lastly, if I'm dealing with a plot, I've got, let's go back real quick. Let's go to the bar. I've got my X. My X is going to be my horizontal, right? So my X label and my Y label is up and down. And so if I'm dealing with this, if I want to label my X So it's not even necessarily the label. That's just like my X, my X and my Y. So if I say PLT dot X label, I pass in a value. So I'm going to say count. And then I can say the same thing with PLT dot Y label. So that's my X axis and my Y axis. And I'm going to pass in manufacturer. Now I've set up my bar. And I'll show you, we'll kind of walk through that here in a second. If I want to see it, I just say plt.show. And now if I run this, I have created a bar chart where my x-axis, this guy, has a label of count. Perfect. My y-axis has a label of manufacturer, and it also has a title of number of cereals by manufacturer. Now, let's say I wanted my title to be a little bit bigger. There is an argument I can pass in, and we can see that there's tons of different things. I can pass in font size, font weight, color, vertical alignment, horizontal alignment. So I'm going to do font size. I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to say font size equals, I'm going to say 20. If I run this, now you can see that my font got a little bit bigger. I can do the same thing with my labels and say font size. I don't want them quite as large, so I'm going to say 12. Cool. And now you see that they're a little bit bigger. Maybe not bigger. Let's do 15. Cool. Now you can see it says count, manufacturer, just a little bit bigger, but not quite as large. This is all that is expected if we are dealing with the belt exam. This is all that you're expected to do. We're going to talk next week about really diving into visualizations, different things we can do, different color patterns. For right now, this is all that you are expected to do. Any questions on what we did here? Does this make sense? Can you guys put a 1 in the chat? This makes sense. Put a 0 if it does not. Cool. Now let's say I did want to inverse the chart right here. What I could actually do up here is just say dot sort values. Yeah, there's an underscore sort values. And now you see that it switched. It goes from smallest to now largest, to where if I rerun this, now it switches and I got Kellogg's, General Mills, Post, Purina, all the way down to 0. Cool. So that's a bar. Now another one, I might want to see the distribution of cereals. We saw that it had hot or cold. So what I can do is same sort of thing. I can say cereal types equals cereal of type dot value counts. Okay, now somebody walk me through what's my next step. If I wanted to create this bar, what is my next step here? Doing the same thing we just did.
I'd say just give it a title. I guess give it some headers, I imagine.
Yeah. Before I get a title, I've got to create my plot, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Plot.
Yeah. So I'm going to say cereal types dot plot. I'm going to pass in what kind of plot do I want this to be?
I say a bar chart would be fine.
Yeah.
Bar plot.
Why would you say a bar?
I would say because it's a categorical, so serotype is mostly a categorical
Yep.
value. So
Yeah, and this one might make more sense just to have it vertical because there's only going to be 2. Cool. And then I can have a serial or PLT. Oops, sorry. Title that says something like Cool. Cool. And then if I say PLT dot show, here we already, it gives us, because it has this category hot or cold. Now I can give it, and I would encourage you guys, you know, I didn't do it here, but go and make an X label and a Y label. If I wanted to change the color here, I could just say color. Now what color takes in is a list of colors. So here I'm going to say blue. And then I'm going to say red. Color equals. And now I've got a cold and hot. Now, obviously, if I would have done the opposite, if I would have said red then blue, my red would be cold, my cold would be red, and then my hot would be blue. Cool. Any questions on what we did here? Okay. Now, if I'm dealing with histograms, then what I'm wanting to see is the distribution of my data. Now, if I've got a numerical value, this is a great one to sort of understand what's going on. So let's go ahead and create one, and then we'll talk about what this default number of bins means. So let's go ahead and create a histogram. Now, this one's a little bit easier. I don't need to get the value counts because, again, we don't get value counts on a numerical value. All I have to do is say serial dot, and then the column that I'm trying to target, this one is going to be calories per serving, because that's what it asked here. And then all I say is dot hist. And by doing that, it creates this histogram right here, where I see a distribution of the calories per serving and seeing how it's distributed throughout my data. Now, this isn't associated to any sort of serial maker. That'd be a multivariate because we'd have multiple columns, right? This is just one column. But this is kind of ugly. This guy's up here. Let's go ahead and clean it up just a little bit. So let's go ahead and set my X label. So I'm going to say plt.x label. I'm going to say calories. Right, because if I'm looking at this right now, I don't have any labels. I have no idea what I'm looking at, right? This could literally be anything. So let's go ahead and let's label that. Let's give it a Y label. So let's say plt dot Y label. And I'm going to call that count. So that's how many of my cereals have that. Perfect. Let's give it a title, say plt.title. And say calorie distribution. And then plt.show will show as well. Okay. So there's a couple things, right? This looks nice. This looks okay, right? So I see that it goes really from a little bit lower calorie all the way up to 160. But what I can see from this data is that the majority of my cereals, right? And not the majority, but sort of a large amount is within this 100 to 120 range. That's kind of a larger range, right? It sort of doesn't tell the total story. And that's because when we are using a histogram, what it does by default, if I don't change bins, what it does is it sets it into little buckets. It sets my data and my distribution into little buckets and pairs it together, right? So here by default, it created 10 little buckets to say, if you're between X and Y, then you're in bucket 1. If you're between this one and that one, you're in bucket 2, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't always give me the best understanding of this, of my data. And I can change how many bins or buckets, but it's technically called bins. I can change how many there are, but what we can use, and why this is not automatic, I don't know, is we can actually set it to auto. And instead of using 10 by default, it will look at my data and figure out how many bins I really should be using. So if I wanted to do it this way, I'm going to do serial Calories. Oh. Per serving. Cool. I'm gonna say dot hist. And then whenever I call my dot hist, there is an argument I can pass in called bins equals, and then I'm just going to say auto. Now it will auto figure what it needs to be. I'm just gonna copy and paste this stuff for the sake of time. I've got my X label calorie still, Y labels count. My title is calorie distribution and PLT show. Now, if I look at this, now I can say, oh, okay. It's no longer just somewhere between 100 and 120, but we see that 120 is actually pretty low, right? But the majority is around this 110, 115 value. Okay, now I have a better understanding. I actually see that there's sort of an outlier here to where all of my data is here, and then this guy's super low. But you see in this one, it kind of grouped like there was some within the 60, but there's not, right? It's sort of either around 30 or 40, and then up to like 70-ish. So by using Bins Auto, it just helps give you a better understanding of what your data and what the distribution of your data looks like.
How do you add values to the X axis though, so you can see exactly what those represent?
You mean like, how do I add?
Yeah, so the in between 60 and 80, like how do you add
sure.
in a value?
We're gonna talk about how to on week 4, we're gonna talk about how to alter the X-axis and the Y-axis because it's a little bit more.
I didn't mean to get ahead.
No, you're good. I like it. Way to go. That's awesome. No, way to go. Cool. Awesome. Now the last guy, any other questions on this real quick? Let's see if it's, let's just look. We got a little bit of time. Just to see if we can dive in and show you where to go. Matplotlib dot hist docs. So here I've got my histogram function, right? So in reading the documentation, I can look and see all the different things that if I wanted to, let's sort of dive in, setting the number of data bins, the density. Let's see how to select these parameters. Here's some sort of references to this guy. Okay, right here, this is what I'm wanting. Here's my matplot pyplot.hist, right? So here's this actual method we're using. Here's the things that you can pass in, right? To where I can pass in X, which is, what do I want to, do or what that is, what my bins are. If I wanted a specific range, if I wanted a specific density, if I wanted a bar, what the different hist types are. And if you scroll down, you can see, well, what are all these things mean? So I can look at the different densities, the like hist type, if I wanted bar stack, step filled, it defaults to bar. So I can see all these different things that we can do. So if you are wanting to sort of dive in even more, let's see if I think it's label. Let's just check now. I'm curious. Label equals, and it said str. Nope, didn't change it. Yeah. But by using these, by looking at this information, we can dive in and start really looking at all the different pieces, all the different things that we can change, we can alter. Again, not really necessary for the belt exam, but especially if you're really interested in this and data analysis, looks like something you really want to dive into. being like a data analyst, I'd really encourage you to dive in to this Matplotlib documentation. I'll put this in the chat for you. Cool. Okay, so the last one we're dealing with, and typically is the hardest, is our box and whisker plot, or box plot for short. What this does is it shows us different quartiles and outliers, and is really great for visualizing if there are outliers within our data. So, but I will say this one thing is typically if you, especially if your audience is not very technical, you want to stay away from doing this because it sort of can look overwhelming, right? Like transparently, if we look at this at the beginning, you can be like, oh man, I don't quite understand what's going on. Even if you showed me this data, I don't know what's going on. And the whole point of exploratory data analysis and explanatory data analysis, when we get there on next week, is it's not for them to have to figure out. They should be able to understand what's going on within our plot or within our graph within like 5 to 10 seconds, right? If it takes them longer than really like 7 seconds to actually understand what's going on, then that means your graph's too complicated. We're going to look at some really complicated ones and some ones that were really messed up next week, but just knowing that that is the point of what we're doing here. And so with that in mind, a box and whisker plot, if you're dealing with a non-technical audience, can be a little bit overwhelming, but let's dive into the different pieces. What this does and what this can answer is how spread out is our data? Is the data skewed high or low? And are there any outlier values that are very far from most of the others? Again, we talked about that. I'm wanting to look at, the house sale prices in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've got one that's 6 million and the rest are not even near that. That is an outlier, right? And by using this, I would see, oh, I do have an outlier here. I can dive into my data and sort of figure out where that's going, maybe finding out a max or doing something of that nature there. So if I'm looking at this, just kind of reading, if I'm looking at this box part, this is what we call our interquartile range. That's anywhere from Q1 to Q3. And so that's the 25th percentile of my data all the way up to the 75th percentile of my data with the median in between there. Now, the way we get this maximum and this minimum is not the minimum or the maximum within my data. So that's just really important to know, right? That's not the minimum value and the maximum value within my data, but it's actually calculated by taking my Q3 and then adding 1.5 times the interquartile range to that Q3 to identify what is like a, not an understandable, but what makes sense as a maximum. What should my range in that sense be? And if it's outside of that, then it considers it an outlier, right? That's where this dot comes from. Same thing with the minimum. That is not the minimum value within my data. What it does is it takes wherever our Q1 is located. And if we use .describe, it'll automatically give that to you, right? It'll take that, it'll take my IQR times 1.5, and it will subtract that value from my Q1, and that sets my minimum whisker, right? Anything below that is an outlier on that side as well. Cool. So if I wanted to check the summary of my stats, I could do that, right? I would just say, let's say that we're trying to do this for potassium content, which is within my data. I could say serial of milligrams of potassium. Perfect. .describe. And this is going to give me my count. So how many values are in there, what my mean value is, my standard deviation, the min is, my 25th percentile, my 50, my 75th, and my maximum. And so this will give me that information there. And so let's say that we just from sorry if you guys can hear the siren, there's a ambulance right outside my apartment. So I'm sorry if you guys can hear that. Let's say that I've got my first quartile is at Q1 is at 40, my Q3 is at 120. My IQR actually takes the difference between the two, right? Of my Q1 and my Q3, which gives me 80. So if I am trying to discover what my minimum and my maximum is, I'm going to take my Q1, which is 40. I'm going to subtract 1.5 times 80, which is 120, which is going to give me negative 80. That's the farthest point right here. And then vice versa. If I am dealing with my Q3, I take that 120 because it's still the 1.5 times the IQR plus Q3 plus that value. And that gets me my 240. Anything outside that 240 or below the negative 80 is going to be what shown as an outlier. Any questions on that? I know this is sort of confusing. Cool. Let's just go ahead and make one real fast. And then we'll be done with class. The last thing I've got. So if I wanted to make this, I can say cereal. I, again, am going to do milligrams of potassium. I'm going to say dot plot. Or I'm going to say kind equals. I'm going to pass in box. This is a box plot. It's a box and whisker, but it's typically known as a box plot. I'm going to give it a title where it's going to say distribution of potassium content in cereals. That's my title. Give it a font size of 20. Perfect. And then lastly, let's just do, well, let's see what this shows and then see what's going on. Cool. So it shows this milligrams of potassium, right? It shows that column. It shows that I've got some outliers here, but I don't really know what these numbers are. So it might make sense if I create a label, right? Where I can say plt.y label of milligrams. MILI. Perfect. So now I see that I've got a label on my Y. My X is already there. I can create a label, but it shows me milligrams of potassium. And then I've got this distribution of potassium content in cereals as my title. I see where my median's at, it's just under 100. Here's my whisker. Any questions? This is all that's expected of you on the belt exam, doing something like this. Now you can get fancy. And I think we'll get a little bit fancier next on Thursday, where we start dealing with like how to take this grid off and how to do that stuff. But just to wanted to get your feet wet of what does it look like to start plotting and dealing with this information. You have to do 2 out of 3 of these. Danielle, seems too easy to be Drew, LOL, but then when I'm alone, it's a different story. I hear that. It hits way different when you're like, wait, how do I do this? Good news is you guys have access to this file, so you should be good to go in that regard. Remember, a bar is for categorical, a histogram, and a box plot are for numeric. Any other questions, friends? Today was sort of like a slower class. It seems a little bit easier than us drinking from a fire hydrant. But I know that you guys have also been going a million miles. So I wanted to make sure that this class was a little bit lighter for you. We'll hit the multivariate on Thursday.
I noticed earlier that the data was, it said float, and we're talking about like numeric numbers and things like that, amounts of this, amounts of that. Do we have to have it set to a certain like integer, for example, like for the graphs to work, or obviously not because it's been working?
Yeah, so no, you remembering that an integer is, or a number is an integer, a float, and a complex number. So that's like way back. That's a callback from like the first lecture.
Right.
And so all of those just count as a numeric value and it'll handle that. Now, if I were to try to do like a bar on these values, it would look disgusting. There'd be a million bars. It would look gross.
Hmm.
So we don't want to do that. Like if I'm going to do it just to show you how gross it looks. And if you do this on the exam, I'm not going to count it, unfortunately. I'm just going to call this gross equals, let's say this. A value count. Okay, so then if I were to take this information, not that one. Let's take this one. And put it in here. Instead of manufacturer count, it just say gross. Oh. No. That one's actually not so bad. That one's actually not so bad. But if we had a lot of data, I would have, and it was like if we're dealing with Titanic and we're dealing with like fair, like the fair values. Let me see if there's another one that's worse. Let's see. Rating of cereal. That's what I'm gonna do. Oh, it's with a capital R. Like if I did this, that's what this looks like. Right? Because there's all these different numeric values. That doesn't tell us anything. Right? That tells us absolutely nothing. So don't do this on your exam. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any other questions, friends? 6:02. Okay, well, that's all I've got. If you guys have any questions, feel free to hang on and hang out. We got a couple of minutes for office hours. If not, I hope you guys have a wonderful night.